The text message lit up my phone just past 7:30 on a Thursday evening. It was from my son. Mom, Brittany sold the piano. Don't be mad. For a moment, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. That piano wasn't just a piece of wooden keys, it was the Steinway upright I'd saved for years to buy, the one my late husband helped wheel into our house on Polk Boulevard in Des Moines. Every memory of my teaching days, every student recital, lived in that polished frame. And now, sold. Without a word to me. I tried to steady my breathing, but the air in my living room felt thick, like the humidity that sticks around after a Midwest thunderstorm. My hands trembled as I scrolled down to see Brittany's follow-up. We needed the cash. It's just furniture. Just furniture. I could almost hear the words dripping from her voice, sharp and dismissive. She knew better. I told her countless times it was mine, bought before she was even in the picture. If you're watching this, subscribe and comment where you're watching from. The real punchline came the next morning. A call from my lawyer, Charles, who chuckled softly as he spoke. Eleanor, you're not going to believe this. Guess who just tried to sell me your piano? I froze. My daughter-in-law hadn't just pawned off a family heirloom. She'd walked it straight into the hands of the one man in Polk County who had the paperwork proving it belonged to me. And that's how the quiet life I thought I'd earned in retirement suddenly spun into a storm of betrayal, legal filings, and a battle that would test whether keeping the peace was worth more than keeping my dignity. If that sounds harsh, here's how we got there. That night, after Charles's call, I sat alone at my kitchen table. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound, steady like a low drumbeat reminding me the world hadn't stopped, even if I felt like mine had tilted sideways. I poured myself a cup of coffee, though it was far too late in the day for caffeine. Habit, I suppose. Teachers live on coffee, even retired ones. I stirred it slowly, watching the swirl of cream as if it might settle my nerves. I kept asking myself, how did it come to this? How had I let someone like Brittany feel bold enough to sell something so precious, without so much as a phone call? The truth was hard to admit. I'd spent most of my adult life clinging to a belief that keeping the peace was safer than speaking up. With my students, I set clear boundaries. But at home, with family, I folded. I let Brittany take over holiday menus, let her redecorate corners of the house, even let her store her extra boxes in my basement when she and my son moved in temporarily. I told myself it was just easier that way. Easier until it wasn't. The piano wasn't just an instrument. It was a marker of my life. I bought it at age 30, teaching lessons in my home to make ends meet while raising my son. It was the first thing I purchased outright after my husband's union insurance finally helped us breathe again. The receipt, tucked into a folder Charles himself had notarized, was proof not just of ownership, but of the years of sweat behind it. Now, Brittany wanted me to believe it was just furniture. I thought about my son, Daniel. He wasn't malicious, just weak when it came to standing up to his wife. He'd always wanted a calm home, maybe because he grew up with a mother who flinched at conflict. I couldn't even be angry at him without feeling guilty. That guilt, that silence, had become my own trap. But sipping that lukewarm coffee, I felt something shift. I realized silence had only invited more disrespect. Brittany hadn't woken up one morning and decided to cross a line. She'd been walking past my lines for years, and I'd kept erasing them so she wouldn't trip. Maybe, in her mind, that piano really was hers to sell. After all, I never said no in ways that counted. Still, the betrayal cut deep. A Steinway wasn't cheap. Back when I bought mine, it cost me over $8,000, a small fortune for a young teacher in the 1980s. Today, it would fetch more than double easily. And even if it had been worth nothing, it was mine. That truth, simple as it was, had been buried under my fear of confrontation. I thought about Charles's laugh on the phone, the amused but firm tone. "You'll want to come in tomorrow, he'd said. We've got some choices to make. I didn't sleep much that night. Every creak of the old house echoed. I lay there wondering what choices he meant. Sue my own daughter-in-law. File police reports. What would neighbors think? What would it do to my son? And yet, a quiet answer rose inside me. What about me? For years, I told myself peace was the prize. But peace without respect wasn't peace at all, it was surrender. I didn't know the whole road ahead, not yet. But I knew one thing, Brittany had underestimated me. But the truth didn't start that night. It started months earlier. To understand how we ended up here, you'd have to rewind a few months. Back before texts about sold pianos and lawyer phone calls, back when Brittany and Daniel first asked if they could stay a little while at my house. It was early spring in Des Moines, the kind where the snow has finally melted but the grass still looks brown. I'd just gotten home from HYV with my groceries, milk, eggs, a loaf of multigrain bread, when Daniel called. Mom, our lease is ending sooner than we thought. The landlord sold the place. Could we crash with you for a couple months until we figure out what's next? I hesitated. I'd been enjoying my quiet retirement routines, mornings with the Des Moines Register, afternoons gardening, evenings teaching 1 or 2 private piano students in my living room. But he was my son, and I knew rents in town were climbing. 2 months seemed manageable. When they moved in, Brittany wasted no time making herself comfortable. She set up her Keurig on my counter, moved her scented candles onto my mantel, even tucked her yoga mat in the living room corner. At first, I told myself it was fine. Temporary. But then came the suggestions. Eleanor, wouldn't this space look better if we moved the piano into the back room? It's so bulky in here. I forced a smile. The piano stays put. That's where I teach. She pouted but didn't press. Not then. A week later, she mentioned again, this time while wiping down the kitchen counters. It's a shame that thing takes up so much space. Honestly, it just looks outdated. Outdated. She said it like she was describing a shag carpet. I swallowed my irritation, poured myself another cup of coffee, and let the comment slide. That was mistake number 1. See, Brittany had a knack for testing waters. She'd float an idea, wait for my reaction, and if I didn't push back hard enough, she'd take another inch. Before long, my basement was filled with her temporary storage. Her car sat in my driveway while mine was pushed to the curb, and she even started answering the landline when it rang, as if my house had become theirs. Daniel, bless him, was blind to it. He worked long shifts at Principal Financial downtown, came home exhausted, and just wanted quiet. He thought Brittany was helping out. Helping. She was nesting. It all built slowly. One evening at dinner, over Casey's pizza because nobody felt like cooking, she leaned back and said, you know, we've been thinking, maybe we could stay longer. At least until the baby comes. I nearly dropped my slice. The baby. She grinned, triumphant. Daniel looked sheepish. We were going to tell you. Brittany's expecting. And just like that, my house stopped being a temporary stop. It became their plan. Now, don't get me wrong. I love the idea of being a grandmother. But I also know what happens when boundaries vanish. People forget their guests. Which brings us back to the piano. My students, 2 middle schoolers from the neighborhood, came by every Tuesday and Thursday. They loved that Steinway. It wasn't flashy like the shiny new Yamahas at West Music, but it had soul. You could hear it in the depth of the low notes, in the way the keys held just a touch of resistance. I kept the original receipt in a folder upstairs, along with other important papers, my mortgage payoff letter, insurance documents, and, most importantly, Charles's notarized statement of ownership from years ago. Back when my husband and I drew up our wills, Charles had insisted, document everything of value. Saves a world of headache later. Turns out, he was right. But at the time, I didn't think much about that folder. I thought more about how Brittany wrinkled her nose when my students came over, complaining about the noise. Noise. That piano had paid for half of Daniel's college tuition. That piano had kept the lights on during winters when utility bills shot up. But to Brittany, it was just an eyesore. I remember one particular Saturday morning in May. I was watering my flowers out front, petunias and marigolds, when I overheard Brittany on the phone. She stood in the driveway, speaking low, but I caught enough. Yeah, a Steinway. I don't know, maybe worth 10 grand. No, she never even plays it herself anymore. My heart sank. At the time, I convinced myself I misheard. Who would she even be talking to? A friend? A dealer? That was mistake number 2. I ignored the warning signs. Because by July, the house was no longer mine in practice. They made grocery lists and stuck them on my fridge. They reorganized cabinets. Brittany even had the nerve to suggest repainting my dining room, to brighten it up. And all along, I let it happen. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. But the truth. Every inch I surrendered made her bolder. Until finally, one night in late August, she crossed the line completely. Which brings us to the plan I should have made sooner. When Charles called me that Friday morning, his voice carried that mix of calm humor and seriousness that only lawyers seem to pull off. "Eleanor," he said, "you've got yourself quite a situation. Brittany walked in here trying to sell me your Steinway." I nearly choked on my coffee. I sat there at my kitchen table, clutching the receiver like it might slip away. "She what?" "She said you gave it to her," he replied, and then added, "Of course, I have the notarized documents in my files. The bill of sale, the will drafts. You're solid." That word, solid, was like a lifeline. Up until then, I hadn't thought much about fighting back. My instinct had always been, keep quiet, don't make waves, hope things smooth out. But now, Brittany hadn't just insulted me or cluttered my basement. She'd crossed into theft, plain and simple. Charles leaned in with a suggestion, "You've got a couple of options. We can send a cease and desist letter. If she refuses to return it, we can file in small claims court. Either way, the law's on your side." I scribbled notes on a yellow pad, my hands trembling slightly. "Wouldn't that cause a rift with Daniel?" Charles paused. "The rift already exists. The only question is whether you protect yourself." He was right. So, I made a plan. Step 1, document everything. I dug out the folder from my upstairs drawer, the Steinway receipt, notarized papers, even an old photo of me and my late husband standing proudly beside the piano when it was delivered. Proof mattered, and I had plenty. Step 2, confront Brittany, but with backup. Not in anger, not in shouting. Just facts. Charles drafted a letter, formal but sharp, stating clearly that the piano was my property, that any attempt to sell it without my consent was illegal, and that further action would follow if it wasn't returned immediately. Step 3, set a timer. Charles told me, give her 7 days. That's more than generous. 7 days. It felt like a countdown to reclaiming not just the piano, but my dignity. But even as I rehearsed the steps in my head, doubt crept in. What if Daniel sided with her completely? What if Brittany spun some story to neighbors about me being cruel, or unwell, or worse? Des Moines isn't New York, you can't sneeze without someone knowing about it by dinner. And then there was the baby. I didn't want my grandchild to be born into bitterness. But at the same time, what kind of grandmother would I be if I modeled silence instead of strength? I thought about my husband, gone 10 years now. He'd been a factory man, tough as nails but fair. I remembered him saying once, during an argument about bills, "Ellie, if you don't stand up for yourself, people will write your story for you." Well, Brittany had tried to write me right out of my own story. I wasn't going to let her. So the plan was clear: keep calm, keep legal, keep every receipt and paper in order. If she thought she could bully me into silence, she was about to learn the hard way that I had both time and truth on my side. And still, under all that resolve, a whisper of worry, Brittany wasn't the type to take humiliation quietly. Then the pushback started. The cease and desist letter went out by certified mail the following Monday. I watched the postman tuck the envelope into his bag and felt a strange mix of relief and dread. One step forward, but I knew Brittany wouldn't take it lying down. Sure enough, 2 days later, Daniel showed up in my kitchen with his shoulders tight and his voice strained. "Mom, Brittany's furious. She says you're embarrassing her, treating her like a thief." I set down my coffee cup. "She is a thief, Daniel. She tried to sell my piano." He rubbed his temples. "She thought you didn't want it anymore. She thought." "No," I cut in, sharper than I'd intended. "She knew. She's heard me tell the story 100 times. That piano is mine." Daniel sighed, the weight of being pulled between two women heavy on his frame. For the first time, I saw the cracks in him too. My silence all those years hadn't just enabled Brittany, it had left Daniel unequipped to stand firm. The next blow came in the form of whispers. A neighbor, Marcia from 2 doors down, called me after her morning walk. "Eleanor, honey, I hate to say this, but Brittany's been telling folks at church you've been forgetful. That maybe you're not fit to handle things on your own." My chest burned. Forgetful. Fit to handle things. That wasn't just gossip, that was planting seeds of doubt about my competence. I pictured the sympathetic looks at the grocery store, the pitying tones from people I'd known for decades. That was complication number 2, my reputation. And then came the real kicker, a letter slid under my door one evening. It was from Brittany, handwritten in her looping script. "Eleanor, this has gone too far. The piano is a family asset, not just yours. Since Daniel and I live here now, we have a right to make decisions too. If you keep pushing, we'll be forced to take legal steps of our own." Legal steps. My jaw clenched. She had no claim. But the audacity was staggering. That night, I pulled out the yellow pad again, jotting down every insult, every rumor, every piece of pushback. Documentation wasn't just about receipts now, it was about patterns. And then, as if the universe wanted to twist the knife, one of my piano students' parents texted me, "Hi Eleanor, we're going to pause lessons for a while. Brittany said you might be moving soon. We didn't want to commit if you weren't sure." I sat there staring at the screen, my fingers numb. Brittany had gone so far as to undermine my teaching, the one joy I still held on to. Mini reveal number 1 came the following morning when Charles called again. "Eleanor, I've been digging. Did you know Brittany applied for a personal loan last month? She listed the Steinway as collateral." I nearly dropped the phone. Collateral. That wasn't just casual greed, that was calculated. She'd planned to use my piano to back her debt. I felt the anger rise, hot and heavy, but under it was something clearer, resolve. This wasn't about a piece of furniture. It was about respect, survival, and boundaries I should have drawn years ago. That's when I realized I'd been looking at the wrong problem. Charles's words about the loan rattled in my head all night. Brittany hadn't just been greedy, she'd been strategic. Listing my piano as collateral meant she was willing to gamble her financial mess on something that wasn't even hers. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan circling slow and steady above me. For weeks, I'd been framing this battle as one of recovery, get the piano back, restore what was taken. But that morning, I understood something bigger. This wasn't about an object. It was about power. If I let Brittany skate by with a slap on the wrist, she'd only escalate. If I stood firm, though, maybe, just maybe, I could draw a line deep enough that even she couldn't step over it. The next Sunday, after church, I asked Daniel and Brittany to sit down at the dining table. The air smelled faintly of the cinnamon rolls I'd baked that morning, but the sweetness did nothing to cut the tension. I placed the cease and desist letter on the table, then the receipt for the piano, then the notarized affidavit from Charles. I stacked them neatly, one by one, like a dealer laying down cards. Brittany, I began, my voice steady, this is not your piano. It has never been your piano. You tried to sell it, and you used it as collateral for a loan. That's theft. Her face flushed crimson. That's not fair. Daniel and I live here now. We're building a family. Don't you want to help us? I met her eyes, calm. I do help. I've opened my home, my table, my life. But help doesn't mean surrender. This piano isn't a family asset, it's my property, and the law agrees. Daniel sat there, shoulders hunched, silent as a stone. He glanced between us but didn't speak. That silence. It broke something in me. For years, I'd bent myself in knots to avoid making him uncomfortable. But watching him shrink now, I realized, protecting his comfort had cost me my own dignity. So I said it out loud, for the first time in years, no. The piano stays. End of discussion. Brittany's eyes narrowed. We'll see about that. She pushed her chair back, the scrape echoing through the room, and stormed upstairs. Daniel lingered a moment, his lips parting like he wanted to say something. But in the end, he just followed her. I sat alone at the table, staring at the stack of documents. My hands trembled, but not from fear, adrenaline. For once, I'd said no. That moment was the midpoint shift. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was reframing the fight. This wasn't a tug-of-war over an instrument. It was about reclaiming the boundaries I'd let slip for years. The next morning, I called Charles. I'm ready, I told him. Ready for what? He asked. To stop asking for permission and start following the rules, every single one. So I stopped playing defense and went on the offense, legally, carefully, step by step. When Charles said, follow the rules, he meant it literally. Iowa law might not be flashy, but it's clear when it comes to property ownership. The Steinway wasn't part of marital assets, wasn't joint property, and most importantly, it was documented. Step 1 was filing a property recovery demand. Charles drafted it, I signed it, and he sent it by certified mail, giving Brittany and Daniel 5 business days to comply. He told me, this isn't optional. If they don't return it, we file in small claims court. I marked the deadline on my calendar in red ink. 5 days. I made copies of everything, receipts, photos, notarized statements, and stored them in a binder. One copy went into Charles's office, another in my own fireproof safe. If Brittany thought she could spin a story about me being forgetful, she'd find the evidence airtight. Step 3. I called Wells Fargo, where the loan application had been filed. With Charles's guidance, I submitted a formal notice that the collateral listed, my piano, was not, in fact, Brittany's to offer. That meant if the bank tried to collect, they'd be stepping into contested territory. The clerk on the phone sounded unimpressed until I gave her Charles's case number. Then her tone shifted. Thank you for letting us know. We'll put a hold on that account until this is clarified. One more brick in the wall. I went public, in my own quiet way. I typed a simple, factual review on the local Facebook community board. If anyone is approached about a Steinway upright for sale in the Des Moines area, please know it belongs to me. Ownership documented and notarized. Sale is unauthorized. No drama. Just facts. But facts travel fast in a town like Des Moines. By midweek, whispers circled back. A friend from church called. Eleanor, did Brittany really try to sell your piano? People are talking. I kept my answer short, yes. And I'm handling it legally. It felt strange, almost freeing, to say it that way. Handling it. Not hiding it. The 5th day arrived. No piano returned. No apology. Not even a word from Daniel. So Charles and I filed the small claims petition at the Polk County Courthouse. The clerk stamped it, $95 filing fee, date of hearing set for 3 weeks out. As I walked out of that courthouse, papers in hand, the September air felt crisp and cool against my skin. For the first time in months, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Filing the petition should have been the turning point. I had the paperwork, the law, even the timeline all on my side. For a few days, I let myself believe the storm was finally calming. Then the backfire came. The first sign was Daniel. He showed up late one evening, standing in my doorway with his hands jammed into his pockets. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Mom," he muttered, "Brittany says if you don't drop this, she'll move out. With the baby." The words hung heavy. He looked torn, like a man being pulled apart at the seams. "Do you really want your grandchild growing up without a grandmother around?" My throat tightened. That was a low blow, using the baby as leverage. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to remind him the choice wasn't mine. But all I said was, "Daniel, I want a grandchild who knows respect. Not one who grows up thinking stealing is okay." His face fell. He left without another word. The second blow came the next morning. A voicemail from my piano student's mother, apologetic but firm, "Eleanor, we've decided to cancel lessons indefinitely. We just don't feel comfortable with the situation right now." That word again, situation. It carried the weight of gossip. My teaching, the last thread tying me to my purpose, was unraveling because Brittany's lies were spreading faster than the truth. By midweek, I learned Brittany had gone on the offensive. She posted a long Facebook status claiming I was losing my memory and that she and Daniel were just trying to protect family assets. She even hinted I might not be safe to live alone. I sat at my kitchen table, scrolling through the comments, each one a dagger. Some friends defended me. Others asked cautious questions. But the damage was done, doubt had been planted in public. And then came the hardest hit yet. Charles called with news. "Eleanor, I've reviewed the filings. Brittany's countering. She's claiming the piano was a gift from you when they moved in." A gift. My jaw dropped. "She has no proof," Charles added quickly. "But it muddies the water. The judge will need to hear evidence." Evidence I had, but the thought of standing in court, defending myself against my own daughter-in-law, made my stomach twist. What if the judge believed her? What if the whispers of forgetfulness tilted the scales? That night, sitting in my quiet house, I felt something I hadn't in years. Powerless. I'd built a careful plan, step by step, and it had only pushed Brittany to fight dirtier. And then, while flipping through that yellow pad of notes, one line caught my eye, an old scribble I'd almost forgotten. May, driveway, Brittany on phone, Steinway, worth 10 grand. Until one line in an old message changed everything. I flipped back through my notes, staring at the scrawl I'd written in May, driveway. Brittany on phone. Steinway, worth 10 grand. It came back in a rush. I'd been watering the petunias, overhearing just enough of her conversation to feel uneasy. At the time, I convinced myself I'd misheard. But now, with everything on the line, that detail hit different. Brittany hadn't just floated the idea of selling the piano on a whim, she'd been plotting for months. The next morning, I called Charles. "I think I have something," I told him. "She was trying to line up a buyer months ago." I wrote it down. Charles's voice sharpened. That's important. Do you remember the date? I rifled through my calendar. May 14th. Around 10 in the morning. He whistled softly. Eleanor, that was before she even moved the piano, before she started pushing you to change the living room. That means this wasn't confusion over gifts or assets, this was premeditated. That could swing the judge's view on credibility. I pressed the phone closer. But it's just my word. A note in a pad. Maybe not, he said. Phone records. If we subpoena her call log, we might see exactly who she spoke to that day. A dealer, a loan officer, someone who could testify. That's not hearsay, that's evidence. My heart pounded. Suddenly, all those months of doubt, those whispers about forgetfulness, those accusations of confusion, looked laughable. I'd remembered enough to write it down, to track the date and time. That little note wasn't weakness, it was my strength. Charles filed the request. A week later, the records came back. There it was, plain as day, May 14th, 10:07 a.m., a 5-minute call to Des Moines Fine Instruments, a local piano reseller. Charles grinned when he showed me. Eleanor, this is the nail in the coffin. She was shopping your piano months before she claimed you gave it to her. That's not a misunderstanding. That's intent. I sat there in his office, the soft tick of his wall clock filling the silence. Relief washed over me, but alongside it came sorrow. Because the truth wasn't just that Brittany had stolen from me, it was that she'd never respected me in the first place. Every smile, every "thanks for letting us stay," had been a cover for what she wanted, leverage. And Daniel. He wasn't malicious, but he was complicit. He'd let her steer, even when the road was clearly wrong. I drove home that afternoon with the windows down, cool September air brushing against my face. For the first time, I didn't feel like a helpless old woman fending off gossip. I felt like someone holding the trump card. As I pulled into my driveway, I saw Brittany's car parked out front. She was sitting on the porch, scrolling through her phone, smug as ever. I walked past her without a word, climbed my steps, and shut the door behind me. For years, I'd let her bait me, corner me into arguments where she twisted every word. But now, I didn't need to argue. I had proof. That night, I spread the documents out on my table, the receipt, the affidavit, the cease and desist, and now the phone records. One neat pile, each page like a brick in the wall I was building around myself. Now I knew exactly where to stand, I whispered, almost to myself. Because Brittany hadn't just sold my piano. She'd sold her credibility. The courthouse in Polk County isn't glamorous. Beige walls, buzzing fluorescent lights, the faint smell of coffee drifting from a vending machine down the hall. But when I walked in on the morning of our hearing, documents tucked neatly into a binder, I felt like I was walking into a battlefield. Charles met me at the entrance. His suit was crisp, his smile calm. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded, though my palms were slick. More than ever. Inside the small courtroom, Brittany sat at the opposite table, her hair pulled back tight, her expression confident. Daniel sat beside her, eyes cast down, tapping his foot. For a second, my heart clenched at the sight of my son looking so trapped. But then I reminded myself, I hadn't put him here. She had. The judge called us to order. Brittany's attorney went first, painting a picture of a generous mother-in-law who had gifted her son and daughter-in-law a piano when they moved in. He spoke of family assets and misunderstandings, leaning heavily on the idea that I was forgetful and inconsistent. I clenched my jaw, biting back the urge to interrupt. Charles placed a hand lightly on my arm, a silent reminder, patience. Then it was our turn. Charles stood, his voice steady. "Your Honor, this case is not about misunderstandings. It's about documented ownership. Exhibit A, the original receipt for the Steinway, dated 1986, paid in full by my client, Eleanor. Exhibit B, a notarized affidavit signed in 2010, confirming her sole ownership as part of her estate planning. Exhibit C, photographs spanning decades showing the piano in her home. He placed each item on the table like chess moves, deliberate and undeniable. The judge flipped through them, expression unreadable. But then came the moment Brittany hadn't prepared for. Charles held up a single page. Exhibit D, he said, phone records from May 14th of this year. My client noted overhearing Brittany on the phone discussing the piano's value. These records confirm a call made to Des Moines Fine Instruments that very morning. This was months before the alleged gift. The courtroom air shifted. Even Daniel looked up, eyes wide. Brittany's face flushed. That's not, she's twisting this. The judge held up a hand. Miss Brittany, please wait your turn. Charles continued. Furthermore, Wells Fargo has confirmed that Brittany attempted to use the Steinway as collateral for a personal loan, despite not holding legal title. This demonstrates not only intent but deliberate misrepresentation. Silence. Thick, heavy silence. The judge leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. The evidence is clear. Ownership lies solely with Eleanor. The attempted sale was unauthorized. I am ordering immediate return of the property and damages in the amount of $3,500, representing both legal fees and interference with business, as Mrs. Eleanor's teaching was disrupted. My chest swelled with something I hadn't felt in months, validation. Brittany's lawyer stammered, Your Honor, surely. But the judge cut him off. This matter is settled. Judgment for the plaintiff. The gavel struck, sharp and final. For a moment, I sat frozen. Then Charles turned to me with a small smile. Congratulations. You won. I should have felt triumphant, but what I felt was calm. Like the storm had finally passed. As we gathered our papers, Brittany hissed across the aisle. You'll regret this. You've ruined this family. I looked her dead in the eye, my voice low but steady. No, Brittany. I saved myself. The family part is up to you. Daniel opened his mouth, as if to speak, but no words came. He just followed her out, shoulders slumped. Back at home that evening, I walked into my living room and touched the smooth wood of my Steinway. The movers had delivered it back that afternoon, just as the judge had ordered. The keys gleamed under the soft lamplight, waiting. I pressed one, a middle C, and the sound rang out pure and steady. It wasn't just music, it was victory. For years, I'd let silence win. But not this time. This time, I'd followed the rules, built my wall of evidence, and stood tall. And though the battle had left scars, my son's silence, neighbors' whispers, I knew I'd done the only thing that truly mattered. I'd reclaimed not just a piano, but my voice. Then came the calls. The first call came from Marcia down the street. Her voice carried both relief and curiosity. Eleanor, I heard about the ruling. I just wanted to say, you did the right thing. Don't you let anyone tell you otherwise. Her words warmed me more than she realized. For weeks I'd felt like the neighborhood gossip target. Now, the tide was turning. The second call was harder. Daniel. His voice was quiet, almost boyish again. Mom. I don't know what to say. Brittany's angry. She says you humiliated her. I swallowed. Daniel, I didn't humiliate her. She did that herself. All I did was protect what's mine. There was silence on the other end. Then a soft, I know. I just wish it hadn't come to this. So did I. But wishing didn't change the truth. Within days, the whispers in town shifted. Where people once hinted at me being forgetful, now they nodded with respect. A church friend even patted my shoulder and said, "You showed strength, Eleanor. Real strength." And Brittany. She avoided me entirely. She and Daniel moved into a small rental across town. Word was, she'd had to scramble to cover the damages the court ordered. I didn't feel joy at her struggle. But I did feel relief. A deep, cleansing relief that the battle was done, and my boundaries were finally carved in stone. And just when I thought it was settled, a few weeks passed in quiet. The leaves in Des Moines began turning, reds and golds sweeping the streets. I thought the storm had finally moved on. My piano was back, lessons were resuming, and the house felt like mine again. Then came the knock at the door. It was the mail carrier, handing me a certified envelope. The sender. Polk County Recorder's Office. My heart skipped. Inside was a notice. Someone had attempted to file a lien against my property. The filer's name. Brittany. I sat down hard in my chair, rereading the paper. She'd claimed I owed her reimbursement for household contributions during her stay, utilities, groceries, even property improvements. Improvements. She'd barely cleaned up after herself. I called Charles right away. He chuckled grimly. "Eleanor, don't worry. She doesn't have a legal leg to stand on. Anyone can file an attempt, but it won't survive review. It's more tantrum than tactic." Still, it stung. Brittany wasn't just lashing out at me, she was trying to keep her claws in, even after the judgment. And here's the twist, the recorder's clerk, a woman named Linda, had flagged the lien before it could move further. She called me personally. "Mrs. Eleanor, I don't usually do this, but I wanted you to know, I've seen people pull stunts like this before. It won't go anywhere. But it does show you how far she'll go." Linda became my unexpected wild card, someone inside the system who had quietly protected me. I hung up feeling oddly grateful. Yes, Brittany had tried another angle. But the fact that it fizzled before it could bite proved something important. I didn't need to live in fear of her games anymore. A few days later, I bumped into Daniel at HYV. He looked worn down, carrying a gallon of milk and a tired smile. "Mom," he said softly, "Brittany's, well, she's struggling. She's not talking to half her friends now. People know what she tried to do." I touched his arm gently. "Daniel, I don't want her ruined. I just want respect. That's all I ever wanted." He nodded slowly, as though that idea had only just begun to sink in. Walking back to my car, I realized something. The real battle wasn't about pianos or paperwork. It was about finally demanding the dignity I should have insisted on years ago. What I learned wasn't about them. It was about me. Looking back, the whole ordeal taught me something I wish I'd understood decades earlier. For most of my life, I believed keeping the peace was safer than setting boundaries. I thought silence was kindness, that swallowing my pride was the price of family harmony. But silence didn't bring peace. It only gave others permission to walk further and further across lines I never defended. Brittany wasn't the first person to test my boundaries, she was just the boldest. Through this battle, I learned that standing up for yourself doesn't mean tearing others down. It means telling the truth, clearly and calmly, and letting the chips fall where they may. Boundaries are not walls to keep love out, they're fences that show where respect begins. I also learned the power of documentation. Every receipt, every note, every record mattered. That yellow pad scribble about Brittany's phone call, something I nearly dismissed, turned out to be the key to proving her intent. In a world where gossip spreads faster than facts, written truth is your best defense. Most importantly, I realized peace without respect is just surrender in disguise. My piano wasn't about money. It wasn't even about music. It was about the principle that what is mine, and no one has the right to rewrite that story but me. Now, when I sit at my Steinway and let my fingers drift across the keys, I hear more than notes. I hear the echo of a hard-earned lesson. Never trade dignity for silence. Here's the picture I want you to keep. The house is quiet now. The boxes Brittany once piled in my basement are gone, her candles no longer clutter the mantel, and the driveway belongs to my car again. Evening light filters through the curtains, painting the living room in gold. I sit at the Steinway, the same spot where months of tension once simmered, and press the keys gently. A soft chord rings out, steady, certain, mine. This room, this house, this life, it feels different now. Not because the furniture has changed, but because I have. For the first time in years, I'm not shrinking back to keep others comfortable. I'm standing, firm and steady, like the polished wood beneath my fingertips. I think about my son. About the grandchild who will arrive soon. My hope is simple, that they grow up in a family where respect is non-negotiable, where kindness doesn't mean silence, and where love can stand shoulder to shoulder with boundaries. I glance at the photo of my late husband on the side table. In the picture, he's young, his arm around me, both of us smiling next to the newly delivered Steinway. I whisper, I finally did it. I stood tall. The room hums with quiet. Same piano. Same living room. But a different me. If this hit home, subscribe and tell me your state in the comments. Your story might be next.